stand by for manual transmission. In 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, I'm Manus Dextra. I've been a video gamer since Pong and a partial quadriplegic since 2015. VR gaming has been a big part of my rehab, and in this video series I want to highlight some of the games I've used and help raise awareness about the need for accessibility in VR. One of the reasons I love VR so much is because it allows me to do and experience things that I cannot do and experience in real life anymore, which brings us to the subject of this video. In addition to being a lifelong gamer, I was also a lifelong river rat, and up until my health started deteriorating about 10 years ago, kayaking was a very important part of my life. So for those of you who are in a hurry, here's the too boring didn't watch summary of my review. Kayak VR Mirage looks and runs great on my mediocre gaming rig. This, along with realistic physics, makes for a very convincing kayak simulation. If you have a VR-capable computer and the physical ability to use motion controllers, buy this game. And buy it right now. I promise you, it will be the best $23 you ever spend. If you want to know more, check the description for timestamps to the various sections of the video. And while you're there, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more accessible VR content. It only takes a moment, but it really helps this brand spanking new channel out. In the next section, we'll talk about hardware requirements, settings, and performance. Then we'll discuss actual game content, and finally I'll cover accessibility. I'll go over the minimum physical requirements and how to play this game if you have trouble moving your arms. I'll also talk about the developers' stated future plans for accessibility and make a few suggestions about how the developers could make this game much more accessible. So let's get to it. Performance-wise, I can't believe how good this game looks and runs on my puny by YouTube standards VR rig. I'm running this off an M.2 SSD on an i7 RTX 3070 system. The HMD I'm using is my venerable old Samsung Odyssey Plus with a resolution of 2880 by 1600 at 90 Hz. For reference, that's the same resolution as a Valve Index, but only about 2/3 the resolution of a Quest 2 and about half the resolution of a Reverb G2. Here are my settings. As you can see, I'm running with just under max settings overall. If you look in the upper left corner, you'll see my frame rates do fluctuate a bit, especially during races and in more demanding areas like the Costa Rican jungle stream, but I really don't notice this at all while I'm playing. Then again, I do play a lot of VR, and I'm not really susceptible to VR sickness at all. If you have a system comparable to mine or better, there's plenty of room to turn settings down for a better and more consistent frame rate. Just turning the presets down to high allows me to achieve a solid 90 FPS almost everywhere. I also briefly tested this game on my old GTX 1080 system, and it ran surprisingly well there too, albeit with much lower graphical settings. Obviously, if you have a higher resolution HMD, that will also have a big impact on performance. Now, let's talk about content. If you check the reviews on Steam, one of the few common complaints about this game is that it looks good, but it has no real content. After 40 plus hours of play since the game's launch, I could not disagree with this more. I think this complaint comes from a misunderstanding about what this game actually is. First and foremost, this is a kayak racing simulator. But I think what a lot of players expect and want is a kayak simulator with an open world to explore. The game does offer a free roam mode that lets you explore its 4 racing venues. These areas are beautiful and packed with interesting details and wildlife to discover if you take the time to look. But these areas are also very small. You can probably see everything there is to see in just a few hours of play. For me, the content here lies in just being in these environments. It's a lot like visiting your favorite neighborhood park or going for a ride on your local bike trail. The developers have stated that they plan to expand these environments and create a much more expansive open world. But for now, the game might seem a bit limited if exploring is your main interest. Despite the fact that I will never be competitive, the content that keeps me coming back to this game is the racing. My 2 favorite courses are the Endurance in Antarctica and the Coastline in Norway. Both courses require the ability to maneuver your kayak with speed and precision, and once you figure out how to do this, it's really fun and satisfying. For me, it's not about beating other players as much as competing with myself and doing the best I can. This game has become my main source for upper body exercise and physical therapy. A morning session might involve running the previously mentioned courses 2 or 3 times each, and then finishing up with 15 or 20 minutes paddling around Costa Rica and Kings Canyon in free roam, just soaking up a bit of sun or relaxing in the shady jungle stream. But yeah, at the end of the day, this game is a kayak simulator, and if you don't actually enjoy kayaking, the beautiful, detailed environments probably won't keep you coming back. Even so, this game is only $23 on Steam. If you discover that you don't actually like kayaking that much, all it will cost you is the price of lunch with a friend at a mediocre restaurant. Now let's talk about accessibility and the minimum physical requirements to play the game. The way the game is set up, it doesn't really care if you're sitting or standing, so playing seated is not a problem. For controls, the game only supports motion controllers for making inputs and paddling around in the environments. So you will need to be able to grasp motion controllers, pull trigger buttons, and move your arms at least a bit to play the game. Luckily, there is a specific technique and an app called WalkInVR that can greatly reduce the amount of movement needed to paddle around the environments. I actually came up with this particular method by watching another presumably able-bodied YouTuber. Instead of doing an actual proper paddling motion which involves using arms and shoulders, he was just moving his hands in front of him as if he were pedaling a hand cycle. I'm sure many of my fellow partial quads know what that's like from physical therapy, and if you can manage that even a little, you can probably play this game. So let me demonstrate. This is me using the hand cycling technique without any additional help. As you can see, it doesn't take a huge range of motion to effectively maneuver. But we can reduce even this range if we use the boost motion feature from WalkInVR. For those who may not be aware, WalkInVR is a third-party app for people with physical disabilities which helps to make VR games more accessible. Boost motion does exactly what it sounds like. It amplifies your movements in the game. As you can see, it does reduce the motion needed to paddle around by quite a bit. This app is free to try on Steam, but you will need to deal with a periodic banner ad. If you find the app useful, there's also a premium version for $30 that removes the banner. So anyway, as of late August 2022, this is about as accessible as the game gets. The developers have expressed an interest in making the game more accessible, and they do have a guided path mode listed in their near-term development plan. From what I understand, it would allow people who can't physically paddle at all to at least experience the environments on a guided tour. I think that's a really nice gesture, especially considering how small this development team is. And when and if this happens, I'll be sure to update this review. So now I'd like to offer one suggestion that would make this game much more accessible to an even broader range of players with all kinds of abilities. Adding Xbox controller support. Simply adding support for this would also add support for all these controllers too. I know adding Xbox and adaptive controller support is possible because I can almost do it myself right now with this. This is another VR utility app from the developer of WalkInVR. With this, I can use an Xbox controller to move the paddle around in the game. Unfortunately, this app is still in early access and it just doesn't have enough in the way of user adjustments to fine-tune the control and paddle in a coordinated way. But I'm sure someone with actual coding skills could use this approach to make a custom control profile for Xbox and adaptive controllers. Anyway, those are my thoughts on this excellent game with a few ways to improve it. Feel free to share your ideas about how to make this and other VR games more accessible and inclusive in the comments below. And check back soon for more VR game reviews with an emphasis on accessibility. But until then...
You will now be released from manual control. Mr. Dextra thanks you for your cooperation. You will now be released from manual control. Mr. Dextra thanks you for your cooperation. You will now be released from manual control. Mr. Dextra thanks you for your cooperation.